Okay, well, there we are. First, I will say good morning to Dr. Subramaniam Rajan. Thank you for being here with us. You lead, Rajan, this first session for us of the Mahotsav, a great festival. This is a celebration. It's not a festival, it's a celebration, I think, truly of all that at the quintessence, like you wrote yesterday or day before to Payal, that, let's say, Dr. Prem Jain thought of, you are thinking about many others in the world across, different regions and cultures are pushing, as it were, this membrane of both economic and ecological possibility. And that, I think, makes the Mahotsav, a lot more significant than simply a celebration of things. As a culture, we are used to celebrating. We are used to doing so many things, sometimes as rituals. But I think, to me, and I reflected upon this before I say this in some considered ways, that after 3 years of doing this festival, this year, I can see that we are truly trying to see how we can secure the best of such reflections from across the world at the geographic levels and from across various spaces that people like you inhabit, spatially speaking. So to me, Rajan, your being here at the beginning of this week, I think is very significant. Thank you so much for instantly agreeing. I know it is 6 a.m. there, and we made this change to 6:30 thanks to your requirement, your need for wanting to be, at a more civilized hour than some 5:30 a.m. The other is this, that I am indebted to a great deal to people like Payal and Debashish and Yatin and others who do this more as seva. This is more as, as a labor of love, shall we say, if you want to say it in English. English is a very poor language. It doesn't say many things that our languages can support in terms of articulation. This edition, the fourth edition, therefore, today it starts with innovations of this kind in both the built spaces and the built environment, which means, therefore, the building scale as well as the city scale. How do you, therefore, bring compatibilities there? How do you solution sustainabilities? What, as youngsters, many of you as engineers and architects who are present here today, and who listen to this, post this conversation, I know it's also on YouTube live stream just now, and therefore this recording is available for a lot more people to see later. And to me, you start with innovation. Tomorrow we go into the future of India, India's water scenario. If you ask me, across the world, and more particularly so in India, the crisis on water is at the very top of the table. Next comes energy, perhaps, and then there are other challenges. And if anybody asks you, what are the top three challenges of this century, if you're an engineer or if you're an architect or a designer or whoever you are, I would say water comes first. There may be other things linked to transportation and energy and such things next. So that is tomorrow. And then after that, we have the memorial address, the distinguished memorial address. There are some stellar speakers there on Thursday. January 26th was when Dr. Jain was born. It just happened that, this man's cosmic destinies, I think, was very hugely connected with many things. And I don't want to spend too much time to delve on things that were so unique about this person called Dr. Prem Jain. Payal has had the rare blessing of being able to think of him every day, every hour, every minute. She's doing something or the other that is, in some ways, having her to think about Dr. Jain. And I think that's a great blessing for him, for the father, that his soul is being nourished constantly by people like her and many others, many thousands of others who are students and followers. I will leave it there. I must thank the governing council of the Prem Jain Memorial Trust, the board of trustees, of course, for being who they are. And as we step into the fourth year, there's a great deal more that the Prem Jain Memorial Trust has set for itself. The memorial address will have K.T. Ravindran and others. Then we have Dr. Raj Rajaram from Chicago speaking, I think, on Friday. Then we have another wonderful session from another person who's present here already, a very lovely, distinguished, extremely dedicated, insanely committed person called Ranjan Khatri, who's going to speak on Saturday. And then we have the Shraddhanjali, which comes up on Saturday. Payal Jain. I'll request you now to see if you can take the floor for a few minutes to share whatever you want to say at the beginning of this wonderful week of great celebrations. Over to you, Payal.
Thank you very much, Doctor. I only want to say thank you to you. I want to welcome everybody to the fourth Mahotsav. And we have come a long ways from the time we sat in a room and conceptualized the Mahotsav. Today, I feel it actually is a celebration happening across the country. And I think without you and without everybody who's here, it would just not have been possible. So I'm hoping 3 years down the line, we'll have many more joining this movement. Every year, this year we have reached out to almost 10,000 students, which is double of what it was last year. Our challenges are engaging more and more students. So we're on the right track. I'm just grateful to Dr. Rajan. I'm grateful to Niranjanji, Gunjanji, everybody who's made this possible, today's session. And I won't take any more time. I would like everybody to see this little short clip that we have on Prem Jain Memorial Trust and the Mahotsav and the thought behind this event.
Yeah, Payal, before you begin the film, let me acknowledge the presence of another legend in our lifetime, Kirti Shah. He will be the first one to tell you that he is not even a qualified architect. He comes from this 1960s. He was one of those people who midwifed that entire creative process, which got to, for several generations, something called the CEPT University, Center for Environment Planning and Technology. And as a phrase, he was one of those few people who worked on that at that point in time in 1964 or some such. Kirti Shah, Kirti Bhai, thank you for being here. I know you can't speak, but I know you will listen to this. Mrs. Renu Jain, you're always there, quietly listening to these things. I was so immensely moved when you called one day and said, it's so nice to be in these meetings, which are a celebration of your dear husband's, revered husband's, shall we say, not just memory, but his wonderful worldview of thinking itself. Over to you, Payal, again. And Yatin, maybe you want to show the film now. Yeah. Yes. The audio, please.
The world is at crossroads as far as the safety and well-being of our ecosystem is concerned. With rampant urbanization, environmental degradation, and grave consequences of climate change, an overall path correction has become imperative to the existence of all living forms on Earth. Should we continue with the abuse of our precious natural resources? Should we use technology and innovation to conserve them? Can we reduce energy usage with a mindful approach and renewable sources? Dr. Prem Jain anticipated many such challenges we are facing today way back in the 70s. Over half a century of dedication and tireless efforts, he thought and spoke a language that was way ahead of its time. His passion and commitment to his Janmabhoomi and to his own mother ran equally deep.
From my earliest childhood, it's been ingrained with me that truth will always win, what we call Satyamev Jayate. She also gave us the love for all living creatures, trees and plants, the message of non-violence. And ever since my childhood, I've always respected that all life forms are equally important.
The last 10 years saw the culmination of his efforts by remarkably shaping the green movement in India, and his countless admirers began to refer to him as father of green buildings in India. The green revolution he started is the foundation of his legacy. In 2018, Prem Jain Memorial Trust was conceived to carry on his mission and founded upon his values, ideals and vision of a greener Bharat. Today, the Trust enjoys guidance of the best minds of the industry, champions of sustainability, corporate change makers and academicians. PJMT is set on its journey to create, establish and maintain sustainability directions through education, recognition and rewards that nurture future generations.
The best gift you can give to the person is educate him or her. Because then, wherever they are, they will be able to earn and flourish in life.
Each year begins with the Harit Prem Bharat Mahotsav, a week-long celebration of sustainability, and our annual flagship event, Prem Jain Memorial Address. The Trust organizes a spectrum of green initiatives which fill the week of January 26, Dr. Jain's birthday week. The Mahotsav is celebrated across the country with immense enthusiasm by Green Crusaders and our partner institutions through an array of sustainability-driven initiatives and activities. Having deep roots with Indian Green Building Council, the Trust has worked in tandem with IGBC and its chapters. PJMT takes great pride in partnering with esteemed partner societies, corporate leaders, and premier universities across India, working closely with the common mission of creating a greener earth through the year. The Trust is a catalyst for sustainable research and development, sharing innovations and creating a global platform for exchange of thoughts and ideas to nurture future green ambassadors. PJMT has organized more than 300 green initiatives during Harit Prem Bharat Mahotsav in association with its esteemed partner societies, corporates, and institutions across India, and arranged over 300 online sessions by distinguished speakers and industry change makers on sustainable built environment, with participation of more than 5,000 students and working professionals. At this edition of Harit Prem Bharat Mahotsav, we invite you to join this green revolution, to build a brighter tomorrow and change the world we will leave behind for our children. If we can change the way we think about buildings, maybe what we build will change the world.
Gunjan, will you take your 2-3 minutes, please, to share with us your thoughts?
Sure, sir. Very good evening, all the dear student, respected guest, and our distinguished speaker of the day. Let me first, on the behalf of me and the behalf of our Institute of Engineering and Management, Kolkata, take this opportunity to pay tribute to Dr. P.C. Jain, sir. Sir is not only given the seed of Green India, but sir has nurtured it and make it and gifted as a tree to all of us. And further, the founder trustee, Payal ma'am, has given us one of the platform that is going to be itself example of innovation, to take a Uber model, take a further even our the Amul that existing in India. You know, these are the benchmark of India innovation, and where now relevance is the pipe model is not going to work, but the platform model is going to work. Today, ma'am, we really want to pay our respect to you, Payal ma'am. You itself, this concept of Prem Jain Memorial Trust is a innovation for all of us. Dear student, take this note from this, and my sincere request to all of you that today the topic that going to be deliberated here is innovation, building, and the built environment. This topic is very much relevant with known fact that more than 55,000 people is moving from India, 35 rural to the urban area, that 35% that we have as on time. So if India want to grow, we need a faster urbanization. And of course, the built environment is going to play a major role. And as learned in the IGBC conference, that we are building more than 2.5 Chicago. So if that is the level that we have, and with known fact that government of India has introduced various policies and ecosystem, whether it's the ECBC norms, Green India mission, a smart city mission, national energy policy, all are the ecosystem, and further a startup policy. I think stage is set, a seed that given by Prem Jain Memorial, sir, Prem Jain, sir, and now what ecosystem is existing with known fact, India is power. Power is the software industry. I think, dear student, it is a time to introduce our speaker of the day, and Professor Subramaniam D. Rajan. I think you are going to be connected from to right now to the Arizona State University professor who is going to guide you for this important topics, that where you are going to start this innovation. And sir, for your just for information, innovation, environment, and economy connect all of us. And also, I think education connect all of us. Last month itself, my one student has gone to your university. So directly, indirectly, we all are connected in this innovative world, in this global world. And of course, pandemic has taught all of this lesson. So with this note, my sincere gratitude to Premjan Memorial Trust, ambassador of this Premjan Memorial Trust, and all the associates, and the powerhouse, Dr. Hariharan sir. Sir, you are inspiration. Whenever I'm listening you, I'm getting charged, and your whatever the small fraction, I'm passing to my student. With this note, on the behalf of Institute of Engineering, we are putting our not only this one session, but throughout this association to make this venture more fruitful, more innovative, and more serving to the humanity. Over to you, Hariharan sir.
Thank you. I'm sure our Rajan will want to speak to you offline to find out which of your students has joined his Arizona State University at Tempe. We'll leave it there. Subramaniam Rajan, floor is yours. It's now about 6:47 India time. We have other participants from elsewhere too, apart from a couple of you that you know, Rajan. I'll leave the floor to you. You want to share your screen and take it forward? To the rest of you, let me tell you what Dr. Rajan has told me. He does not want his face on the screen now. He's going to shut himself off on the video. And he wants you all to focus on the slides and the presentation that he is going to be sharing with you, along with the thoughts that he will of course be offering. Over to you, Rajan.
Thank you, Hari. It's 6 in the morning, 6:15 in the morning here. It's dark, it's cold, and I'm sure most of you in the evening in India, this time of the year, it is a little dark and cold. Even though we are geographically 12,000 miles away, our time of the day and the way we look at things is probably going to be very, very similar. So you can see the title of my presentation. It says the challenge for the building industry. And my viewpoint is that the building industry has enormous challenges for a variety of reasons that I'll discuss in my presentation. But the no footprint birth to deconstruction life cycle is the way we need to think about things. We knew this, we ignored it, but we can't ignore it anymore. So my presentation is in 3 parts. If you'll please indulge me, the first part is a little bit about my journey, starting in Jamshedpur, where I went to high school, where I went to school. And then I'll discuss my other parts of the journey. The second part is I'll discuss in a couple of slides what my message is with respect to the challenges for the building industry. And third, I'll offer a few of my solutions based upon my experience over the years. So as I said, my journey started in Jamshedpur. I finished my high school there, and then I went to IIT Kharagpur, spent 1973 to 78 there, and met wonderful bunch of people. They were all excellent engineers, excellent teachers, excellent institution, but that was a different era. I majored in civil engineering, and you can see on the screen a recent photograph of the civil engineering building. It was established in 1951. As all of you probably know, IIT Kharagpur is the oldest IIT which was established under the direction of the Indian government, wherein the Indian government has the vision to break the shackles from our past and start a new future. And the campus was enormous and still is enormous, and it has grown enormously. The irony of me showing you the photograph of the building is this doesn't have today the same respect and stature that it should compared to information technology. So I was talking to one of my classmates from IT who just retired as a professor of civil engineering at IIT Delhi. And he was telling me a history of a recent batch of 50 students who graduated from IIT Delhi in civil engineering, out of which only 2 are working in the civil engineering industry, and the other 48 are in the IT industry. And I'll talk about more about that in my later slides. So the biggest message that I got from IIT Kharagpur is that we build our own silos. At that time, working in groups of people with very diverse backgrounds was not there. We were thinking as civil engineers without looking at other people on campus, architects, geologists, mechanical engineers, electrical engineers, and so on. And I had a wonderful teacher called Dr. Sopan Mazumdar, who had recently come to IIT at that time, having did his PhD from University of Wisconsin. And he was the one who said, why don't you go ahead and take your passion over to United States and see what you can do over there. And the reason why I'm going through all this is to tell you that I have made tremendous number of mistakes in my life. I have learned from those mistakes. And most of the times I've never repeated the mistake, though my wife tells me that I keep making the same mistake with her every single day, that I don't pay attention to what she is saying. Anyway, enough of that. And the next part of my journey started in University of Iowa, where I was from 1978 to 83. And the biggest lesson I learned in Iowa is United States pulls people from all over the world. We have enormous diversity. India has that diversity to a very large extent. It's just that we don't recognize the diversity that we have, and we don't encourage the diversity in thought process and in our backgrounds and in our culture as we should. So my professor who invited me to University of Iowa was Professor Jasbir Arora. He retired a few years ago. He graduated from University of Punjab, did his bachelor's there, and then came to the US and did all his master's, PhD, teaching, and so on. I had very interesting PhD committee. I had Dr. Edward Haug, who had a military background, a very strong mathematics background. I had a person from mathematics. I had a person from physics in my committee. And lastly, my professor who was my mentor was a professor called Asghar Bhatti from Pakistan, who did his PhD from University of Berkeley. And we had a very diverse set of people over there, students from all over the world, Vietnam, Taiwan, China, European countries like Greece, and so on. And I had to completely change my thinking from being a civil engineer to being an engineer, and thinking in terms of more diverse tools available in order to solve practical problems. So diversity doesn't mean diversity in people, it also means diversity in thoughts and initiatives. So the next part of my journey switched over to Arizona. So I joined the faculty in 1983. And what you see on the slide is the oldest building on campus, which has been refurbished. It is in a remarkable state. The university started off as a college, and there has been phenomenal growth since I joined in 1983 to the present time. From about 20,000 students in 1983, it has reached 116,162. That's the official number as of last semester. And we are one of the biggest universities in terms of funded research work without a medical school. Medical schools in the US bring in enormous amount of money from the National Institute of Health. Discounting that, we are the 6th largest in terms of funded research work in the US, ahead of very well-known institutions like Caltech, Carnegie Mellon, and so on. And we are ranked 10th in civil engineering in terms of the US News and World Report. Now, remarkably, a very large number of students, graduate students in the university are from India. As Hari mentioned, there's a student, I think Gunjanji mentioned that there's a student who joined from his uh, alma mater on to ASU. And we jokingly refer to ASU as Andhra State University because of the large number of students from Andhra Pradesh and Telangana. The next part of my presentation deals with the background as to why we need to pay particular attention to this new challenge that has been brought upon in the building industry. We have problem of shrinking resources. We have problem of shrinking land that is available to us. We have a much greater scrutiny from the entire world in terms of how we use the resources. I don't have to tell you that the weather patterns have changed enormously in the last decade or so, though the telltale signs were there from long ago. And we have just chosen to ignore what those signs are. So here's a graph taken from NASA, where the global mean estimate of the land and ocean temperature is shown as a function of time starting in 1880. On the x-axis, you can see 1880 here going up to 2020. And most of the changes that have taken place appear to be minuscule in terms of what we undergo in terms of temperature changes over a particular day. But these minuscule changes of 1.5 to 2.5 degrees Celsius has enormous impact on the way we live. So I was, just before COVID, I was sitting in the dining hall of the guest house in IIT Delhi. And that particular night, there were just 2 tables that were occupied. I was sitting with a couple of new faculty who had joined IIT Delhi, and in the adjoining table, there were visitors to IIT Delhi. And one of the ladies there remarked at that time, this was December of 2019, I don't understand why people are talking about global warming. Look at the temperature drop in Delhi that has occurred in the last couple of days. At that day, the temperature had dropped to 7 degrees Celsius. And very unfortunately, I cannot keep my mouth shut when people make statements like this. The educator in me takes over. So I have to tell her, ma'am, there is a big difference between weather and climate. And I have to spend a couple of minutes telling her how things have changed, not only in Delhi, but all over the world in terms of the changes in the climate that is impacting all of us. So with climate change, the building industry and every single person on earth has this issue to deal with in terms of leading a sustainable life in every single aspect of that life, not only at the workplace, but also the way we live. And I'm not going to give you the formal definition that came out of Brundtland Commission, but I'll give you my own definition of what sustainability is. To me, sustainability is trying to define a very complicated topic like pornography. It is very difficult to define, but I don't have to tell anyone when things are sustainable. It's just that people may elect to ignore it. But the signs of what is sustainable living and what is not sustainable living is very easy to discern. And I hope the audience today is going to reflect on what they do every single day from the time they get up to the time they go to sleep, and see whether every single minute of the day somehow or the other is how it is connected to sustainable living and whether they are leading a sustainable life or not. So the last part of my presentation today is to talk about a few approaches. These are my viewpoints. These are not the viewpoints of Arizona State University or anyone else. These are the things that I have learned by working in this area, and some of the things that I've learned over the years. So I'm going to discuss, I believe there are 5 components in terms of the few approaches that I will discuss with you today. So the first one is reduce material waste and over design. This is what I like to call the low hanging fruit. This is easy to pluck, but we still elect not to do so for a variety of reasons. To give you an example, In the United States, these are numbers coming from EPA, Environmental Protection Agency. About 600 million tons of construction and demolition debris is generated every single year. And this is a figure that comes from 2018. And that is twice the amount of generated municipal solid waste. So this is an enormous number. Out of the 600 million tons, 455 million tons were reused, which is good. But we still have a problem with the other 145 million tons that were sent to landfills. The problem with the United States, at least most of the country, is the land, enormous amount of land is available, and land value has not risen to the level where people understand that you just cannot dump things and throw them in landfills. So we have to find a way by which we recycle and reuse. And that is the reason why I put the title of my presentation as looking at this problem from birth till death till reuse. And the third point I want to make is we need to have good construction practices. That starts with understanding the problem, and that starts with good science and engineering. We cannot ignore science and engineering. We have to bring those into the forefront and help and ask engineers and scientists to help solve these problems. So my introduction to really getting my hands dirty started in 1990s with a local problem that a local company brought to my attention. So there was a company here called, or that still is, called Del Webb Construction. They are in residential, primarily residential, and a little bit of office building industry. And they had branched out from Arizona and had gone to a lot of other cities, including Chicago. And they were using steel studs as a replacement for using wood. In residential buildings in the US, the primary building material is wood. And they wanted to get away from wood and get into other material. And very commendably, they were using recycled steel, cold formed steel, in terms of the building material that you see on the screen. So the two components that they were using is this closed tube and this C-channel section. And using this, they were making buildings like this. And they had branched out to other states. For example, they went to Chicago, and come the first snowfall, the first house that they built completely collapsed on the roof. It collapsed on the roof because they did not have proper design calculations go into their design program, and the materials and the cross sections that they came up with was not adequate from a structural point of view. So they came to us and said, do you have a solution? And we said, surely we can use our knowledge to come up with a solution for you. So Hari told me, please try to make sure that you don't come up with too technical issues. And I couldn't resist putting the slide up just to give you a perspective that the science and engineering cannot be ignored. So what I learned back in Iowa kicked in. And I said, let's try to formulate this problem as an optimization problem. And an optimization problem is what each one of us do every single day subconsciously. If you could make only that a conscious way of looking at engineering problems or resource allocation problems, then we will find very interesting solutions to problems. So this is a paper that was published back, I believe, in 1999, based upon what we did for this particular industry. And I wrote a computer program going back to MS-DOS and then to Windows back in the mid-1990s. There was no machine learning involved. There was no artificial intelligence involved. It was heuristic-based mathematics driving the design. So on the top of the screen, you see a suggested initial design that I gave to the numerical optimization tool. And it came up with a very elegant solution that you see on the bottom of the screen. So I said, take a 20-foot span with the height of the truss being 4 feet 8 inches. these dimensions were given to us by the local company and use the closed tube and the open section to design the structure. And this is the design that we came up with. And when I showed this design to the local company, they said, this doesn't look like something that would work, because this is something that we have never seen, never used, never built. And I said, if you're skeptical, then go ahead and build one, and we'll test this in the laboratory for you. So they built one, and they brought it to the lab. They built 3 of these trusses. And in the US, most of the roof trusses are typically 2 feet apart. So you can see a 4-foot span, and the top chord plywood is put. On the top chord, we loaded this with sandbags. We instrumented this based upon what we had available in the 1990s. We loaded it completely, and then we ran out of sandbags. So just to recap, span of 20 feet, 3 trusses, spacing 2 feet on centers. Top chord load, design load was 30 pounds per square foot. Bottom chord was 10 pounds per square foot. And the design load was 1,840. We took it to 2,000 pounds when we ran out of sandbags, and the thing didn't budge an inch. The deflections were extremely small. There was absolutely no sign of distress anywhere in the structure. So we gave them the design program. We gave them the equations to use for the design. And I'm happy to say that they took it, and a large number of structural systems today have been designed using the concept of using cold form steel arising from automotive waste. And I know automotive waste in India will be a big deal when the government norms kick in and old vehicles on the streets need to be taken out of circulation. My second small solution to this enormous problem is improve constructability and quality of construction. And for the architects who are listening in, and for the civil engineers who are listening in, we need to work as a team to design reconfigurable buildings. For example, in the US, malls are dying. So what do you do with malls that are relatively young? We can't just mothball them. We have to reuse them. And if that thought process of reconfigurable buildings were built into the initial design, we would have much less of a problem. Second big problem, which probably may hit us in the next few years, is this work from home. When work from home really takes off, it has taken off a little bit in the US, what will happen to the office buildings? Are the office buildings going to be mothballed? Is it easy to use an existing office building for something else? What will happen to homes that are currently being designed where you need a certain part of the house to be used as office space? So that's an issue that needs to be addressed. The second and the third points have got to do with the building industry itself. The building industry, unfortunately, hasn't changed over the last 30, 40 years. While other industries have moved on and become extremely efficient or more efficient than what they were, the building industry has remained stagnant. We don't use automation, though there is signs that things are changing, but we have to increase automation to a very large extent, and we have to increase the worker productivity. So with that regard, at Arizona State University, we have done a little bit of research work in terms of seeing how to improve things. And I'll give you 2 examples. The first one is treating the envelope of buildings. Most of the energy loss or the gain from outside, the unwanted gain from outside energy, comes in through the skin of the building. So a commercial building and residential buildings in the US typically use 40% of the energy use. And if you improve on that efficiency by merely 5 to 10%, based upon existing technology that's available, it'll easily translate to enormous amount of savings in energy. So we researched an area called phase change materials or thermal energy storage. And I've given here 2 papers that we published going back to 2013 and 14. And I'm very happy to report that two of our students recently have appeared in Forbes top 30. They have received money from SBIR, which is the Small Business Initiative in the US. They've started a company called Encoat. And Encoat has used our technology in coming up with a proprietary blend of thermal regulating additives that you can add to paint, and you can paint the outside of existing and new buildings in order to cut down on the energy usage. And with that, we said, why don't we take that idea of using thermal energy storage and use that in the context of 3D printing. And one of the advantages of 3D printing is that you can have extremely high quality control. You can build components on site, so all the transportation cost can be decreased tremendously. And you can come up with components that can then be used as building blocks in making whatever you want to make. So we have a 3D printing lab on campus where these components were printed. You can see here, foam has been printed on top of concrete wall. Then we have taken waste material like fly ash. And from that, we have put that into the 3D concrete mixture, and we have extruded them into a variety of shapes. So this is, again, one of those borrowing ideas from other industries and using them in the building industry. So the 3D printing technology was not developed in the building industry, but certainly there's nothing which says we cannot take ideas that other industries have pioneered and use them to advance our own industry. So these things will work, again, if you have good modern tools where you can do computer modeling, where you can base things on science rather than gut feeling, rather than repeated testing. So virtual testing is what we do. We design things in the computer, and as a proof of concept, we use the designed computer models and we make actual components and we test them. So on the screen, you see on the top is the computer model of a component where attention has been paid to reducing the amount of material, again, a sustainability concept, and making sure that you don't compromise on safety and you have very high quality control and you extend the longevity of whatever components you're making. So this idea now has been taken to a home that is being built in Tempe. It's a 1,700 square feet home with 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms. 70% of the home is 3D printed. If you're interested in details of this building, I've given a link below, and you can look at the company and the entities involved in using 3D printing technology and automating building homes. And hopefully, once you scale this, the cost will come down, and this eventually can provide a solution for affordable housing. The third component is the use of sustainable materials. Again, whatever I'm saying here is nothing new, but there are some stark realities that we need to deal with. We cannot switch things off today and pass a legislation and say, let's ban the use of concrete and steel. That's not possible. Then the consequences are going to be extremely dire, but we can definitely raise the awareness that concrete and steel need to be made more sustainable and more energy efficient. So you'll find that there are 3 terms, things have evolved over time. There are 3 terms very popularly used today to classify sustainability of materials. One is called embodied energy. Second one is called embodied carbon. Both of them by themselves are not enough. There is a new term which has recently been used called global warming potential. And all these 3 terms look holistically at what is possible in terms of classifying a material or a technology as being sustainable. Now, the bad news is that we have ignored this problem for a very long time. and things have reached a crisis point. So if you look at the paper by Alter, which came out recently in 2019, a 4-storied multifamily building made of low carbon material is the sweet spot, is the optimal design for a zero emissions or near zero emissions building to take care of housing needs. What does that mean? That means that the moment you make a building for use by human beings, automatically on day one, 100% of the emitted carbon has already been sent out into the atmosphere. So we start with something negative, and then we have to find a way of overcoming that. That's not going to be easy. So we have to start thinking in terms of using sustainable materials that have as minimal impact on the environment as possible from the day the design is envisioned and you start the construction process. So Hari told me, please be aware of the fact that a good portion of the audience are people who deal in 100 crore plus building industry, and they're looking to make money while being sustainable. Perfectly fine. And I was thinking I'm the least qualified person to talk in terms of the business end of things, because I have very limited experience in running businesses. But as a consumer, I know that you have to know exactly what the value of a certain thing is, not what the cost is. So I'm giving you a personal example. On the extreme left is the phone that I use. The one in the middle is what my wife uses. The one on the right is what my son uses. All three essentially do exactly the same thing. I have not seen a single difference in our quality of lives that is directly correlated with the cost. So we should be able to find ways of striking a compromise in our own perspectives of what makes us happy and come up with something that is sustainable. So here's a very good example of working with the local building code and the local municipalities. So the use of earth block masonry has now been incorporated. Probably the first city in the US, the city of Phoenix, and the Maricopa County, where I live in, has a building standard that explains exactly how earth block construction can be used, for which building permits will be issued. And I'm not the first one to say this. We are obviously honoring Prem Jain. And Prem Jain, I took this quote in a 2017 newspaper article on Economic Times of India. And he says that green building concepts are nothing new, that Indians knew this long time back, but somehow we seem to have forgotten what our ancestors told us, and we have picked up all the bad things from the rest of the world, and we have really corrupted the way we live in. Which brings me to what Gunjanji said at the beginning. I have to disrespect or respectfully disagree with what he said. I think we need to make things that are outside our immediate domain as a part of our initiative. So I've been a big proponent of reversing the rural to urban migration that has been taking place all over the world. The world's biggest city is Tokyo, and Delhi is not that far behind. If we continue to allow people to migrate from urban areas to the cities, the entire planet will become unlivable. And this is my quote: happiness is not hidden in cities waiting to be discovered. The cities are terrible places to live in. And my good friend Niranjan Khatri is a part of today's panel, and he'll be talking on Saturday. And he'll tell you that we had a very good mutual friend who was an architect who lived in Delhi. And he unfortunately passed away at a relatively early age because of the enormous pollution that exists in Delhi. And we have to find ways of telling the rural people that your lives are as good, if not better, than the lives that we lead in urban areas. And this message has to be given to all the people all over the world, not just in India, every single part of the world. So what are people typically looking for? And I went back and I tried to think as to what Bollywood has told us. So I picked on Roti Kapra Makan. That's the basic essential. And United Nations way back in the 1940s and 50s said, every single human being needs to be given basic necessities as a right and not as a privilege. And that is what modern society needs to do. And unfortunately, the pandemic has clearly shown that we as human beings have failed to live up to that expectation. And I'm nearing the end of my presentation. And the last slide is this very dangerous thing that is happening today. Internet has given every single person with access to the internet a bully pulpit. The bully pulpit can be used for good purposes, but increasingly it is being used for bad purposes. So if you look at the two biggest lies that we have seen from very seemingly organized and huge industries are the tobacco industry and the plastics industry. Tobacco industry told us over and over again that smoking tobacco really is not unhealthy. Absolutely wrong. And then the plastic industry said, don't worry, plastics is recyclable. And unfortunately, it is not. Only 10% of the plastics in the entire world, best case estimate, is recycled. 90% of plastics finally ends up in the ocean, in the landfill. And the building industry has to be very careful not to talk in terms of LEED certification and green building labels and so on, and say, if the building industry gives some other component of the building industry a certification, automatically the problem is solved. It's definitely not true. We know there are big holes in LEED certification. LEED certification started off with very good intentions, and we need to take those intentions and look at modern perspectives, modern science, modern engineering in order to do things the correct way. And finally, I'd like to thank Shashi Tharoor. And I know Shashi Tharoor is a controversial figure for inventing the word called Webakoof. And some of you may have heard me talk about this early on, because everybody these days tends to believe what's on the internet as being the gospel truth. And certainly we know that's not true. So with that, thank you very much. And I'm hoping we'll have a vigorous discussion.
Thank you, Rajan. Webakoof and Bewakoof. Since Rajan reminisced on some of these wonderful people that he's worked with, and he kept cutting into, how some of these engineering ideas collide with design. Yesterday, we heard the sad news that that legendary architect called Murad Chowdhury passed away. Some old timers who are possibly present here will remember that he was an associate. They had an office in CP in Delhi. He was an associate of Kanvinde Rai and Chowdhury Associates, as architects go. In fact, Dr. Jain has also worked with them in the 1970s. They were senior to him. He passed away yesterday. He was the first architect that some of these current generation of senior architects worked with. Prem Chandavarkar is one of them, who happens to reside in Bangalore. Now, why I take this name is, and why I'm talking about Murad Chowdhury, apart from the fact that he died yesterday, is that in much the same ways as Rajan said now, that sustainability is to be experienced. It's not something that you can define easily. What that man said was very interesting. He said,